Oh, you're just in time. The latest version of my app was just deployed to CloudFront. Let's take a look. Yeah, oh, that's taking a long time to load. And that's actually why we're here today. Here's a recording that I took when I did load that. You can see it takes quite a while. One of the things I've noticed is when it's newly deployed, it can take 8 seconds even to load the app. And I've been experimenting as to why. And part of that is because we're using CloudFront, which is like a CDN, and it is caching it the first time. And so when it goes to cache it, that actually is a fairly expensive operation. We'll actually see a little bit more about that coming up. But what we can do to see what's happening is we can go to our developer tools. I'm using Chrome. We can go to the developer tools and we can pull up the network part. And when we reload it, what you'll see that it's still taking a while, but it's taking like, 3.5 seconds now, which is a lot better than it was before. But I think we can do a lot better. And in fact, actually, if we were to just reload this over and over and over, it would actually come down anyway on its own, but that's not a very fair case. I think this is a little more of a good use case. And that brings us to our topic of the day. Here are 7 things that you should be looking at with your web apps. The first thing I would suggest that you do when working with a Flutter web app is to go ahead and add a loading animation. It's actually pretty simple to do, even though I had a hard time finding descriptions and tutorials with it. So let's show you how to do it. And to start with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the gallery for the Flutter app. So you can see there where it loaded it, breathed in a little bit, and came in. Let's take a look at how they did that, because that's one of the beauties, of course, is we can just look at this page source on this. So if we scroll down here, we will see that they've added a div with the styles in here that handle that breathing, and the zooming in and out, and stuff like that. And so when we look at that, that's all done right here, and they add it in. And then as they work their way through the life cycle of getting ready to run the Flutter app, they go ahead and they load it here, they bring it up there, and they do that. So now let's take a look at how we could add something like that to our app. Now, I have not got from our design team exactly what they want it to look like. However, we're going to go with something I think pretty easy. So inside of the body, we're going to go ahead and add a div. And I'm going to give it a class of loading and an ID of loading. Okay, inside of that, we're going to have a style for it. Okay, and in that, we're going to go ahead and create .loading. And we're going to give it several parameters here. First is position is going to be absolute. Once again, this is just a quick thing to try to do with it. We can always make it better as we go along. I'm going to make the top. I'm going to go ahead and calculate it at 50% minus 100 pixels. This is not responsive, so we would need to actually deal with that for a final solution. But let's get it going and see what it does for us. Okay, and then given the fact you can probably guess based on how we did that, the width and the height are going to both be 200 pixels. All right, so we get that going in there, and then we need to add a border. That's going to be 5 pixels. These are just kind of made up numbers. Once again, you can make sure it matches what your app is already doing, or like in my case, I've got a design team, so ultimately, before I'm actually checking code in here, we're going to have that going. So 50% on the border radius. Okay, and then we need to go ahead and do a border top. And that's going to be 3 pixels. It's going to be solid. And it's going to be 3498 dB. And again, I'm doing this, in CSS, even though I do Flutter, so I don't have to do CSS, I'll be honest. All right, so we're coming along here, and then so it's going to repeat, and it's going to go on forever. We need to add the keyframes, which is how that we define what's happening with the spin here. And the keyframes are actually really easy in this case, because we're going to say at 0, it's a transform, and it's going to be rotate 0 degrees, and then at 100%, it's sort of the same thing, but it's the 360 degrees. So that's the same position, but we will make it work. All right, and so now that we've added that in there, we can come down here to where we're going to turn it on. And since I'm not stepping through all of it, I just need to do it a couple times. So we're going to say let loading is going to be equal to document.query selector, and we're looking for loading, hashtag loading. All right, and then we have to turn it off. So that turns it on, and then down here when we're about done, we're going to turn it off. Now, one thing we might want to do here is we might want to go ahead and maybe go ahead and add the timer like they did on the other one. And that actually might cover up some sins that we're going to see in a little bit. So that would be one approach. All right, now that we've done this, let's go ahead and let's see what happens when we run it. And you can see it's got that spinny circle just like we would like. Now you may have noticed that there was still a white screen after the spinny circle went off. And I know what the reason for that is. It's because I'm making an API call and I'm having to wait for the response. Now, later on, we're going to try to work on shrinking that, but I'm not going to be able to make it 0. So what I probably need to do will be to use either a future builder and have some continuation loading screen, or maybe come up with a way so that my first page can have the results fade in as soon as I get them. Either way would work, but we're going to still try to make it as small as we can. So let's go on to step 2. Our second step is going to be to go ahead and take a look with the tools. And so the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and load our app again. Now we just deployed it with the to the new CloudFront instance with a spinning circle part. And you can see that it took quite a while to go there. But if I reload it again, it won't be quite as bad. I come over here and I will go ahead and pull up and take a look at the developer tools. And I've already clicked network over here. And so now when we run this, what you'll see is it's going to start collecting what's called a waterfall. And this waterfall is just showing all of the things that are happening and the time that's going through there. And you'll see this time it took 2.81 seconds. 2.5, 3.5, that's about what this app has been taking when we load. And if you take a look here, you'll see that, like, wow, a lot of time was spent with this canvas kit. In fact, actually, that was over half a second out of our time that we had. We also see that our fonts are coming in parallel. We still might be able to do something about that, but to help that out a little bit, but we'll see what we can do. And then as you look through here, you're going to see that I am, for some reason, downloading fonts twice. Well, the reason is, in fact, I'm using both in a package and in my main application. And so I'm not quite sure I can get around that, but I can definitely start preloading some of these. And more importantly, I can go ahead and prune some of these out, because when I look at this, because I know my app, this Tiempos is not being used by the Woodley Bank app. Woodley Bank, by the way, is just our demo made-up place that we're using. And so we look through there with things like that. We will see the timing on them, and we can do work about that. And if you take a look here, this cache busting thing, that's interesting. So this took over half a second again. And so now we've got like a full second of this time just on 2 calls. Is there anything we can do about it? I think we can do something about it with parts of it. And then we take a look here, we will see that this is actually a call that I'm making to my back end. And so this needs to be authenticated. I can't do anything about making that call, but I might be able to do something about getting us a little bit faster with what we're doing with it. And then I've got, these 3 assets that are being loaded here, that we're doing as part of this page. And so I think we can do something about that. So now that we've looked at the tools, it's probably time for us to go ahead and move to step 3. The third thing I would like you to do when looking through what is being loaded through the waterfall graph is actually take a look and see if you're getting anything that you don't actually need. And that actually is happening in my case. I'm going to tell you a little story though. The very first time I ever did this, I discovered I actually had, it was fonts, and I actually had one font that was put in my pubspec.yaml twice. I'd put all the files in there twice, and so when I started the app up, it was obediently loading them all twice. So mistakes can happen. I hope that when you're looking, you don't find anything like this, but it's helpful to understand what all's being loaded and take a look and see if there are things you can do to streamline what's happening. And so in this case, let's go ahead and take a look in the code. As I look through my waterfall graph here, a couple things jumped out at me right off the bat. And it had to do with these fonts. And if you take a look, I'm actually downloading several of these fonts twice. And of course, the reason why is some technical debt I accrued recently where I refactored my project into a project and then a package I could reuse. And that package needed access to these fonts, so it is in both pubspec.yamls. But where we can really do something about that is all of these fonts are not used in each place. So if we go over here, I happen to know that this Tiempos headline is only used in the other project where it's one of the landing pages for a specific client. So I can get rid of it from here. That's not a problem. Now the other one's a little bit harder, but one thing I do know is I do know that when I'm building this endpoint, so when I'm actually building this actual web app, Open Sans is the only font that I need for as far as the project goes. Everything else is part of that package. So that means that all of the rest of these I can get rid of. And so that's going to save us quite a bit of loading time. And that's what our third thing to do is all about, is it's identifying resources that we don't need to download and making it to where we don't download them. And that gets us a little ways. But now we need to go talk about step 4. The fourth thing I would like you to do when you're working on a Flutter web app is to use that waterfall graph and figure out, are there things that we can basically move forward in our process so that we are able to, when it comes time, if you notice there's several things being done in parallel. And so if we can do that and we can preload these assets, then that would be something that could help us out later on because we won't have to do it later. So let's go ahead and take a look at that and see how that works in practice. Okay, when we take a look here, we'll see there's these 3 images here that we are loading toward the end of the process. And these are things that we could grab at the beginning and be just as good. So if I go over here, I'm going to copy that value, and then I'm going to go back into our code. And when we're looking at it, what we're going to do is up here in the head section, we create a link, okay? And it's going to be preload. Okay, and then its href is going to be the value that I just copied from that. I got it from just right-clicking and doing that. And then we need to tell it to as equals fetch. Okay, and finally we have to add the cross origin. And it's because it's coming from a different place. And so if we do that, that actually works for that first one. And I had 3 of these images, so let's go ahead and put both of these in there. And the second image was going to be, it's called High Equity 968. If I knew I was going to be typing this, I would have probably tried to make the names a little bit easier. But and this one's a JPEG. And then I've got one more, which is going to be same, it's a different place. It's actually in common. And it is the equal housing logo.png. All right, so these 3 images will now be loaded up at the beginning of the process when I'm waiting. See, one of the things I want to show you here is if you take a look, we've got a spot right here where this is taking us quite a while for this to all happen. And we've got several things going on in parallel. So if we could, that's where it would make sense to start really getting some of the things going. Now we don't want to do so much that we delay this happening because this is still going to take a long time. All right, so if we take a look here, then these fonts are the other thing that we could really do this with. So why don't we try to do that too? And so in my practice, this has helped quite a bit. So what we do is it's almost the same exact thing. So we're going to do a link. It's going to be a rel. It's going to be preload. Okay, we're going to have an href, which is exactly the same as what we just did. It's going to be as equals fetch. And it's going to have cross origin. And fonts always have to have cross origin even if they are the same. So if we go over here, we can just do a copy and take care of all of those. All right, and over here, this one's going to be, after we did that one, I've got the next one's going to be italic. Okay, the next one is light. The next one is light italic. The one after that will be bold. I have bold italic. And then I have semi-bold and semi-bold italic. And those are all, there is no, there we go. And that should work for those. And so that now it's going to fetch these fonts at the beginning, and it's going to fetch these images at the beginning. We are up to the fifth thing that I would advise you to do when working on a Flutter web app to try to help get a faster time to that mean time to contentful page. So we've done preloading, and preloading works very well for what it works for. Now, we have some cases where I can't preload things. For example, I need credentials and stuff to go get the status of the collection that I'm working on. And that doesn't make sense for me to put that into my index.html. It's just a little too obvious. Not that API keys, for example, are secure, that really, but I don't want to go that far. So let's go ahead and take a look here and see which HTML tag will help us with that. Let's go into the code. All right, this is the one I'm talking about, is right here. And so this is a call I'm making that I cannot make really and preload the information for. So based on that, let's go ahead and try out the pre-connect tag. What pre-connect does is it goes ahead and it starts the negotiation for it and makes the connection. Now this is only good for about maybe 10 seconds. So this is not something you want to do just to do it at the beginning, but in this case, I know I'm almost immediately going to be calling this function. And so the way that that works is it's a link rel equals, and you guessed it, pre-connect. All right, and in this case, the href, I went and copied it, but doesn't make much sense because it is I only want the base part of it. I don't want the whole thing. So this is api.dev-rb. Rb is my company I work for, and that's what I want to set up for this. And so that is what I'm doing for my pre-connect. Now let's go back and take a look, because I saw something else that looked a little funny here on this graph. So if you take a look here, this one got slowed way down because of other stuff happening. Now it kind of finished before we finished loading some other stuff, but we should probably take a look at this. And oh my goodness, so what's happening is it takes a while to look up DNS for something. It also takes a while to negotiate the SSL. That's a great use of pre-connect. However, let's take a look at what this is. And this is actually a font. And so I actually think we can get away with going ahead and doing another preload with that. So let's set that up. And over here, I'm just going to go copy the value for it, and that's going to just be coming right here and replace it there, and that's going to have that. So that's something else that we discovered that I missed the first time through, but now we get to see that. We are up to the penultimate thing that I would like you to do when working on a Flutter web app, and that is, really as you're scrutinizing this waterfall graph, look for anything that's just really out of the ordinary. And so when you're looking across here, we can see I've got one item that is very long. And when I take a look at it, it's actually taking over half a second of our time with just this one call. So let's take a look and see what the call is. Okay, when I click on this, oh my goodness. Okay, so what this is doing is this is trying to make sure that when it's reading the version.json, that it is not getting a cached version of it. Well, we are already, in my case, using a CDN. And so what this is causing to happen is, even though we're telling the browser to never cache this value, we're acting like it did. And the problem with that is when it has to go and it has to retrieve it from the AWS servers, that takes a long time. And so because of that, that's where we get the half a second. So I took this offline and I worked on it. And what I did was I went ahead for now, I forked the package. This is a community package, so I'm going to go and talk with the people that have made the change and see what they think and try to come up with a way so I can get back into the normal package. But I use this for my analytics, so I need to know certain things that are happening because of that. And so what I did was instead of having the version just normal through pub.dev, I went ahead and I'm getting rid of that, and I've got it added from my forked branch. So my forked repo now has that so that I can do this without having that cache buster in it. Because in this case, it doesn't do me any good and it's doing quite a bit of harm on my load time. So I think we've done a lot. Why don't we go and see how well this works and see how much faster our app runs. And now we've reached our moment of truth. Let's see what we've done for it. Remember, the first time that we do this is longer because it has to go get the cache from the servers. But let's see what happens here. And if we come in here, we can see what's going on. And this took over 6 seconds before and now only 5 seconds. So that's quite an improvement on the first load. But let's see what a second load does. When I run through here, you will see that this one took under 2 seconds. We were close to 3 seconds before. So that's quite an improvement. It's more than a 25% improvement based on what we did. And I think there might be room for more given time and effort. I think that's quite nice. And that brings us up to the last thing that I would like you to do when working on a Flutter web app. And you're already doing it because you listened to this video. Hopefully you've listened to the keynote speech. But what it is stay involved. Pay attention. Flutter is constantly evolving. It's becoming better and better. And that really includes Flutter Web. There's lots of things coming up that are going to really help us out with stuff. And so that's what I want you to do, is keep watching, keep paying attention, and watch as it gets better and come along for the ride. And I want to thank you for checking out this video, and I hope it helps with helping your load times on your Flutter web apps. Thank you.